Hello everyone, and welcome to another interesting game from round 3 of the 2013 Candidates Tournament. Now, as you remember from my video from round 1 and round 2, Vasily Ivanchuk did not have the greatest start to the tournament. He drew his first game against Alexander Grishuk, and then he lost his second game against Timur Rajabov. And Levon Aronian had a pretty nice start to the tournament. In round 1 he drew Magnus Carlsen, and in round 2 he defeated Boris Gelfand. So Vasily has the white pieces in this game, and he would definitely enjoy breaking 50% after round 3. So before we start with the game, we do have a couple of photos from this round. Here is Vasily Ivanchuk before the game, preparing for a great brawl with Levon Aronian. Here we have a photo of Levon. In the back you can see a blurry photo of Magnus Carlsen stretching. And here we have a nice photo of Vasily Ivanchuk pounding that clock, which is kind of ironic because this game is also one of the games that will be decided by not pounding on the clock. But you'll see what I mean by this. So Vasily is white, and he opens with d4. We have knight to f6, bishop to g5. Ivanchuk goes for the Tromposky attack. e6. This is the classical defense to the Tromposky. Knight to d2 and c5. We have e3, b6, knight to f3, bishop to b7, c3, and bishop to e7. Bishop to d3, Aronian castles, and now bishop captures on f6. This is only one of the examples where Ivanchuk gives up his bishop pair early on in the game. Bishop captures, and now h4. So you can see that it's only move 9, and Ivanchuk already gave up his bishop pair and played h4. We have knight to c6 and knight to g5, so going all out here. This is Vasily Ivanchuk going full barbarian mode. g6, you have to prevent the attack on h7. h6 is somewhat h6 isn't so great because white doesn't have to react to this. White can simply go queen to h5, and the attack continues for white. You don't really have to move the knight. Black can never really capture the knight, and then you will open up the h file, and now white is just winning. So after this knight to g5, g6 by Aronian. We have f4, knight to e7, and now queen to g4. So Vasily is putting all of his pieces to the king side. h5, queen to h3, and now c captures on d4. E captures on d4, and now b5. Seems like a weird move, but Aronian has some very interesting ideas about what happens when queen comes to b6, and this queen to b6 move will be a crucial idea in most of the variations in this game. Capturing the pawn doesn't give white anything. Aronian will simply attack it and bring his queen to b6 even sooner. So Ivanchuk is not interested. He plays a3. We have queen to b6, and now rook to g1. Here Ivanchuk is ready to push g4 and break open on the king side. This would be excellent, but Aronian doesn't allow it. Knight to d5, and this was the idea of this b5 move and playing queen to b6. Now you can't push g4 immediately. If you push g4 immediately, then Aronian's idea was bishop captures on d4. Now, of course, the rook on g1 is attacked, and after you play c captures, queen captures, the problem is your rook is still attacked on g1. After something like queenside castle, you could also maybe play rook to f1 to guard f4, but then h captures on g4 will be very nice for black. But after queenside castle, now you get knight captures on f4, attacking the queen and the bishop on d3, and pretty much anything you do here will be extremely good for black. Let's say knight b3, you attack the black queen, but now check, king b1, and now you can either choose. Either maybe you want to just capture the queen and then capture the rook, or you want to capture the rook on g1 and then capture the queen, but the best move is queen to d5. Simply move your queen out of danger and attack the knight on b3. And after white does the same, queen g3, now you simply capture the knight, and the problem is white can never capture the knight on f4. If white captures, then you get bishop to d5, and there is no defense against queen to a2. So this will be excellent for black. So this was Aronian's idea, this b5, queen b6, and the knight to d5. Here Ivanchuk played knight g to e4. we have bishop to g7. Here, the same idea doesn't really apply. If you play bishop captures on d4, you can still play this, but after captures, now white can in fact play rook to f1, because this pawn is not on g4. There is no this in between h captures on g4. And while this is fine for black, you don't really have anything decisive, so you don't really want to give up a pawn in the candidates, give up a piece in the candidates without anything decisive. And instead, after knight to d5 and this idea knight to e4 by Ivanchuk, you can go knight captures on f4. With ideas like attacking the bishop and the queen, like an in-between move grabbing a pawn, because knight captures on f6 comes with check. Now, you check here, king g7, and now you capture on h5 with check. Knight captures, you move the queen, and all is well for white. So, after this knight g to e4 by Ivanchuk, Aronian moves the bishop back, bishop to g7, and then now comes queen to f3. Queen to f3 was an imprecision that Aronian took advantage of masterfully. After queen to f3, he played b4. What's the idea behind b4? Well, first of all, you're breaking open on the queen side. Ivanchuk's king is still in the center. He can no longer castle on the king side. And if you break open on the queen side, then you're pretty much free to attack the white king. So a captures on b4 and knight captures on b4. And what's the idea here? The idea is that if you capture the knight, then f5 is coming, attacking the knight. You can't move the knight is pinned, and this will be excellent for black. So after knight to b4, we have knight to c4. Ivanchuk now attacks Aronian's queen on b6. Queen to b5, we have knight to e5, attacking the queen by the bishop on d3, and now knight captures with check. Knight captures on d3, and now queen to f5, still not allowing Ivanchuk to push g4, and also there is nice pressure on the knight here. On e4 that is currently attacked twice. So knight d to c5, attacking the bishop on b7 and also defending the knight on e4. Bishop to c6, and now comes b4. We have rook to b8, and now rook to a5 by Ivanchuk. And here, this is only move 25, but as we've said in the previous video, in round 3, everyone was in serious time trouble. So Ivanchuk was also in serious time trouble here in move 25, and Aronian didn't want to waste a lot of time here. He wanted Ivanchuk to play fast using his own time. And here Aronian said that he knew that bishop captures on d4 was probably winning, and he was in fact right, but he didn't play this because he didn't want to spend too much time calculating it, and then maybe if it turns out it wasn't winning, then Ivanchuk would also figure out something. But in fact, after bishop captures, pawn captures, rook captures, the white king is still in the center. You're threatening to grab the d4 pawn, you're threatening rook b1, you can double rooks and really cause chaos here. For example, if white decides to do something like king f2, then you simply check him. And after the king runs away, now comes the bishop captures, queen captures, and here you have to run away with the king to h2, and now queen h4 will be checkmate. One of the variations that could happen, but you definitely don't want to allow any rook to b1 ideas. So simply rook to a1, but now rook captures on d4, and now you have 3 pawns for the piece with a better position, so this will be very, very pleasant to play for black. But Aronian did not want to spend too much time here, so instead he played a6. Ivanchuk played queen to e3, and now we have queen to g4. G3, rook to b5, and now rook captures on a6. Rook captures on a6, knight captures on a6, and now e5, the idea of Aronian's pawn sacrifice. And e5 is another excellent breakthrough Aronian found in this game. Now comes d captures on e5, and bishop captures on e4. And here is a wonderful idea. Pause the video here and try to figure out why did Aronian play this. And another thing, can queen capture bishop? If the queen can't capture the bishop, then Ivanchuk is simply down a piece. So can the queen capture this bishop? And if yes, why yes? And if no, why no? And if you can't capture the bishop, what do you play then? So a lot of players thought that Ivanchuk should just resign here. But Ivanchuk, in fact, found a brilliant idea. And, well, for those of you who found the idea, congratulations. Although, you know, you were not in time trouble, I do hope you used your time wisely. but maybe some of you just want to enjoy the show. If you play queen captures on e4, then rook captures on e5 wins the game immediately for black. Your queen is pinned, you can't move the queen, there's a king on e1, black is threatening rook captures queen. If you capture rook, then bishop captures queen, you lose the queen and the game. If you capture with the pawn, then your queen is undefended on e4, queen captures queen this way. Again, you lose the game. So after this bishop captures on e4, it seems like black is completely winning, but Ivanchuk finds this breaking idea, c4. c4, and now rook captures on e5 of course does nothing, because there's a bishop here. You can simply capture that rook. And you have to come up with a move. The knight is guarding b4, the knight is also not allowing the rook to retreat to b8. You have to either play rook to b6 or rook to b7. So what do you play here? If you play something like rook to b7, then you get queen captures on e4, and then the queen is once again attacking the rook. Then you have to retreat rook to b6, and then after check, king moves and c5, white out of a pretty terrible position. Now it's actually white that's pushing here. So after this bishop captures on e4 and Ivanchuk's brilliant c4, we have rook to b6 by Aronian. Now, if Ivanchuk captures bishop, then Aronian captures knight on a6. So Aronian is forcing Ivanchuk to capture the rook here. So Aronian sacrifices the exchange. Queen captures rook on b6. This was forced. And now comes queen to f3, infiltrating now Ivanchuk's position. Ideas like bishop to d3 followed by queen to e2 checkmate are, in the air, so you do have to react to this. Queen to f2 was played, and now queen to a3. Knight to c5. We have queen captures on b4 with check, grabbing a pawn, and like we've said, Ivanchuk was in serious time trouble, and here he has to find a move. This is only move 35. He has to make move 35, and he still has to make 35 and all the way to 40, so 6 moves. So 5 moves to reach time control, and here he played king to d2, but after he played king to d2, he hit the clock, and he realized that his time has once again run out. So this is the third round of the Candidates Tournament 2013, and Ivanchuk already lost 2 games by running out of time on his clock. And the position here is much better than it was in his game against Rajabov when his time also ran out. Here, Ivanchuk is actually up the exchange, and well, it's questionable if he can survive this. Aronian does have the bishop pair, but before this dark square bishop is activated somehow, as currently it's not doing all that much. You have to. It would have to be a precise play by black to win this. But yeah, unfortunately for Ivanchuk, another game lost on time, and Ivanchuk is now 0.5 out of 3. So 1 draw and 2 losses from the first 3 rounds. And Levon Aronian is, after 3 rounds, leading the Candidates Tournament, as he has 2 wins and 1 draw, so 2.5 points out of 3. I will also include an article in the description below. Be sure to check that out. It's a very extensive article about round 3 written by Peter Dodgers at the time round 3 finished, so I do recommend everyone to read it. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, probably with a game from round 4 of the 2013 Candidates Tournament. Thank you all. Hello everyone, and welcome to a very nice game that was played between World Chess Champion Magnus Carlsen and Michael Brancato. It was played yesterday in New York. It was a simultaneous exhibition. The exhibition took place in the Rockefeller Plaza on the 65th floor. It's called the Rainbow Room. We do have a couple of photos from there about Michael Brancato. As you can see on his Twitter handle here, he's a top-level Smash Bros player. So there you have it. Let's see if Michael can smash this bro. And also we do have a couple of nice photos. There you have it. There's Michael alongside some other people and some other contenders. There's a nice photo of him shaking hands with Magnus Carlsen after the game was over, obviously. And here we have a nice photo of the 2 of them together. not that difficult to to decide on who sponsored the event. But yeah, interesting thing about this event, I was also invited to join as a guest. Not perhaps I could even play, but I wasn't all that much interested in playing. But I would have liked to attend. But I had some personal matters to attend to, so I will definitely try to attend the next event of this type. I was invited by Richard Kahn, the organizer, and I met the gentleman in London. He gave me a copy of his book, The Earthbound Parent, and also introduced me to Woody Harrelson. So quite the guy. But yeah, that being said, really hoping to catch the next event. Let's get straight into the game. Carlsen has the white pieces, as the one who holds the simultaneous exhibition always has the white pieces. That's the rule. Otherwise, you could have that whole scenario. For example, when that rich person offered Lascar and Capablanca to play them both in a simultaneous exhibition, and then he would just play Capablanca's move to Lascar and Lascar's move to Capablanca. I think there was an illusionist that also created such an event with grandmasters. But okay, that's a different story. D4 by Carlsen, we have knight to f6, we have bishop to g5. This is the Tromposky attack, and already I've seen in the tweet, I will put a link to his original tweet in the description below so you can check it out. He says that he was planning to go for an Indian game, but the bishop g5 move already surprised him and he didn't know what to do here. He was not aware of the existence of the Tromposky. So he played e6, we have knight to d2 by Carlsen. D5, and now comes E3, just preparing to develop the light square bishop. We have knight b to D7, knight G to F3, and we have bishop to D6. Both players are now preparing to castle. Bishop to D3 by Carlsen. We have castles by both players, and now H6, asking do you want to capture on F6 or go back with the bishop. Carlsen retreats, and here we have B6, and here black is doing perfectly fine. He's ready to play bishop B7, he's ready to develop the rook to C8, for example, he's ready to push C5, the rook is coming to E8, it's quite a nice position. We have C4 by Carlsen, bishop to b7 as planned, and now Carlsen takes this opportunity. He doesn't want black to play d captures on c4, which would free black's light square bishop. So here Carlsen plays c captures on d5, and here e captures on d5 is played. You might think it'd be a better idea to capture, for example, with the bishop. You cannot capture with the knight is pinned. But if you capture with the bishop, yes, now your bishop is free, but now this loses to a very simple tactic, just e4. After the light square bishop moves, e5 wins the game. So here, after c captures on d5, we have e captures on d5, and now queen to e2. Develops the queen, Carlsen connects rooks, and also takes control of the a6 square. We have c5 by black, as planned. All standard ideas one might also use, for example, in the queen's gambit declined. And now bishop to a6 by Carlsen. He wants to trade the light square bishops and also infiltrate the queen side with his queen. Rook to b8, defending, and now comes bishop captures. Rook captures, and now comes e4. Here d captures on e4 was played. A slightly better move would have been c captures on d4. Now e5 is not a threat due to rook to e8, and then black wins the other pawn as well. But okay, we have d captures on e4, now comes knight captures on e4, and now rook to e8, pinning Carlsen's knight, but it's not a really big problem. Carlsen can simply untangle by knight captures. This would come with check, but Carlsen goes for a different plan. Here Carlsen plays queen to a6, and now black has some problems. His rook is under attack on b7, and also the bishop is under attack on d6, and there's no easy way to defend against both threats. The best course of action here for black would be to just capture on e4, allow white to grab the rook, so white would have to win the exchange, and then go g5. After bishop here, captures, and now capture on d4, and at least for the exchange black would have a pass to d pawn, so maybe he could, create some poison there. But okay, after queen to a6, we have queen to c7, now defending the rook and the bishop, but it's quite an often problem one might encounter in chess, where one piece gets overwhelmed in defending both pieces. So the queen cannot defend both the rook and the bishop here, so Carlsen now simply eliminates the defender of the rook, which is the queen. Just forces her to move. Knight captures on d6, the queen now has to move. queen captures on b7. Carlsen now grabs an entire rook. We have a5. Black still has some hopes of perhaps trapping Carlsen's queen in some crazy scenario, but it's mostly a crazy scenario. So rook f2 e1. We have rook to b8 attacking the queen. Queen to a6, preparing to bring back the queen into the game, and now just c captures on d4. And okay, black now has a passed d pawn, but down a rook, not really something to look forward to. But also here there's this problem of this diagonal. Bishop to g3 by Carlsen attacks the queen and also the rook on b8. We have queen to b4 now, and bishop captures on b8. And now you could capture, but then just queen c8 check picks up the knight here, so black doesn't even bother to recapture the bishop. Knight to c5 is played, attacking Carlsen's queen. We have queen to c8 check, king moves, and now queen to f5 check. Black moves back. We have king to h8, and now bishop to e5, attacking the knight, but also the pawn on d4. We have knight d7, defending the knight, also pressuring the bishop, but just bishop captures on d4. We have queen to d6 here, and here Carlsen just played rook to c1. And it was in this position that Michael Brancato, professional Smash Bro player, decided to resign the game. So he was not able to smash this particular bro, but it's playing against the world champion. It's very, very highly unlikely that you will win or even draw the game. Here black obviously resigns. He's down 2 rooks, not just 1. So it would be pointless to continue here. Checkmate is to follow soon. It was at move 27, Carlsen played rook ac1, that Michael Brancato decided to resign the game. And here we also have proof that it actually happened. There you have it, the score sheet. There's everything there. Move 27, rook a to c1, 1-0. It's not signed, but I guess maybe the photo was taken before Carlsen signed it, or maybe he doesn't sign the score sheets at the simultaneous exhibition. So it's hard to say. But yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. It's not the most difficult game the world champion ever had to play, but I thought it was a nice opportunity to bring chess closer to another community, in this case the gaming community. So I thought if at least a few players from the gaming community see this and maybe take up chess, it's worth the while. That's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. Congratulations to Michael Brancato for lasting an entire 27 moves against the world chess champion Magnus Carlsen. I would like to thank Bradford Ajirte, Thomas Smiley, Roger Rothman, Barry McMurdoch, and John Edwardson for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon. Definitely continuing the Capablanca saga. We are about to check out the 3rd game between Capablanca and Lasker. It will be really, really amazing. Thank you all, and I'll see you soon. Hello everyone, we're taking a break from everything else to check up on Lila Chess Zero. Now, we don't cover all that many games that she plays, but those that we do mostly come recommended from you guys. So this is one of the games that has been recommended by you. It's game 61 from the TCEC Super Final, the Top Chess Engine Competition Super Final, Season 15, and it's Stockfish with the white pieces against Lila Chess Zero. D4 is already on the board, sorry about that, in a very nice line of the Tromposky. So for those of you who enjoy the Tromposky, this will be just very nice, and for those of you who don't play it all that often, you'll just see it's really a crazy line, which pretty much disregards developing pieces, but it's best for me just to show you and then see what happens. So in the previous season, in season 14, we've been covering a few games. Lila really played well, and well, it's always interesting to check how a self-learning neural network will do against well, standard engines like Stockfish. And here Lila's been improving by herself, and of course Stockfish has been upgraded as that goes, and it's well, now both of them are in the super final, and they are playing, I believe it is a 100 game match, so will be very interesting to see who comes up on top. So without further ado, you've recommended it, so let's check it out. It's really very nice, so I do hope you enjoy it. Stockfish opens with the d4. We have knight to f6, bishop to g5, so the Trompovsky attack, and it's the way this match goes. So the first Stockfish plays this line of the Tromposky with the white pieces, and then, well, it doesn't really matter how the game ends, then Lila gets the white pieces, and they have to play the same line, so that way they check out how Lila deals with certain openings and how Stockfish deals with certain openings. We have knight to e4 now, attacking the bishop to f4, and now c5, just a nice flank attack in the center. With f3, pushing the knight back, queen to a5 with check. We have c3 blocking, and now knight back to f6. We have d5, grabbing more space in the center. Queen b6 now, pressuring the bishop to go back as the b2 pawn is under attack, and you can't defend it with queen c2 or queen c1 because the queen has to keep an eye on the d5 pawn. So here we have bishop to c1. A very exciting line as bishop goes to f4, then bishop retreats, queen went to a5, then the queen retreated to b6, and that's not even the beginning. We have d6 by Lila, now comes e4, and now e6. And here, this position has been reached before, but there is only one game in the database where knight to a3 was played, and here we have c4, which is a new move in the position, and it is of this moment that Stockfish plays c4, that we have a completely new game, never before played. So we have g6, Lila prepares to fianchetto the bishop, we have knight to e2, this knight is now coming to c3 as this pawn is already on f3, so this knight is coming to c3, and this knight will come to d2 after the light square bishop moves to f1, and then depending on what Lila plays to e3 or either g3. So bishop to g7 as planned, knight e to c3, and here we have castles by Lila. We have bishop to e2, and now comes knight to e8. The white king is in the center, so of course Lila wants to bust open the center with f5. And we have h4 by Stockfish. And now you can see that really both Stockfish and Lila are pretty much playing with the pawns, not really doing anything with the pieces. We have h6. So after h5 comes, you're ready to counter it with the g5, but here we have g4 by Stockfish. So again, just completely disregarding any pieces development, just lunging, forward with the pawns. And now comes queen back to d8. So very interesting. First, Lila played queen a5, then retreated queen to b6, and now queen to d8. And this is something we've seen Alpha Zero do. Alpha will play 7 moves with the queen in the opening, and then just retreat with the queen to the starting squares, and it's just everything against the principles that you are being taught when you start learning chess. Don't bring your queen out too early. Paul Morphy said, help your pieces so they can help you. And here, as you can see, not really a lot of pieces play going on, especially from Lila's perspective. But if you look at Stockfish pieces, also, mostly pawn play. But okay, with bishop to e3, finally we have some development with f5, and now comes f4. Stockfish again just lunging forward, putting everything into the attack. We have queen to e7, and now comes h5. And here Lila blocks with the g5. And now what do you do here? First, queen to d2 by Stockfish, putting pressure on this pawn chain in front of the king. And now, okay, if you've seen this position, let's say knight c3, queen d2 with this nice battery of bishop on e3, you have the bishop on e2, rook on h1, all the pawns advanced, you might think, yeah, this is probably something, white to develop the knight, then the bishop, then the queen, and then, he just started pushing the pawns, but that's not the case. First, the pawns went forward, and only then do we have the development of the pieces. And here, you have e5. And now, this is a complete madness on the board. I mean, look at this bad boy here. Just a massive pawn structure on the king side, and what do you do here? I mean, it's just crazy calculating all the captures. But point being, if you play something like let's say g captures on f5, yes, you do get a very nice passed pawn on f5. But then again, black also gets a very nice passed pawn, maybe not with the g, but with the e pawn here on f4. You have to go back with the bishop, and even if you give up the bishop for 2 pawns, let's say something like this, you will not. I mean, it's an interesting idea, but against such a strong opponent like Lila, of course, Stockfish isn't interested in doing something like this. You would do something maybe if you played against your friend in a blitz game, but not in a serious TCEC super final. So here we have f captures on g5. We have f4 now, and now we must consider a few things. First of all, your bishop is under attack, you could move the bishop back, but also everyone is wondering, but why not g captures on h6? And it's a wonderful line Really, just a nice human line that well, most of us would go for probably, which is very exciting. After you capture on e3, the queen is under attack. So first you have to react to this. Queen captures on e3, and now bishop to f6, just grabbing hold of the g5 square. And now, of course, you want to bust open the g file. You allow black to capture, and then you pin the bishop. Rook g1, and now it seems like white is winning. How do you prevent rook captures? It's just over. I mean, you're gonna develop your knight, castle, and you just bring the other rook into the game, and white is winning. It would be the case if black didn't have rook to f4, and now you don't have a good follow-up with your attack. If you go something like queen g3 to capture now you get bishop to g4, completely unpinning from black. And now the point is, you cannot capture. If you capture, bishop captures on g4, then bishop to h4 traps your queen. So black wins here. Even such a nice check like bishop to e6 check, which is a double check, doesn't help you. Black will just move the king, and there's no good follow-up. You're still there's no good way to take care of this, so you're just gonna lose the queen. But it is a very nice thing, that we have to consider. Just g captures on h6, but it doesn't work. Of course, Stockfish doesn't go for it with bishop back to f2, and now just h captures on g5, completely closing this. And now, I don't know, h6 seems like a very nice human move. You don't want to allow black to close this with the bishop, but Stockfish has a very nice idea. First, we have queen to d3, and now knight to d7. Leela starts developing the other pieces. We have rook to g1, bishop to f6 now, putting more defense, and here not allowing white to bust open anything. Knight to d2, Stockfish starts developing as well, and now queen to f7. We have queenside castle by Stockfish, and now bishop back to d8. Here Leela makes room for the knight to come to f6, but also this bishop is coming to a5 to control this very important diagonal, which you'll see why it's important later. Knight to f3 by Stockfish, and now king to h7. We have rook to g2, preparing to double up on the g file, which you might think, but why double up on the g file? I mean, the g file is, closed solid. Well, or is it? With a6, Leela prepares rook to b8, followed by b5 to bust open on the queen side as Stockfish castle queenside, and now just rook d to g8. And again, if you try something like, there are a lot of ways that white can bust open on the queen side, on the king side. You could go bishop to h4. Let's say if black played a slow move b6, now you could try bishop h4. But black would never really capture here. I mean, but you would put pressure on the pawn here. Black would probably just have to defend it. You will not be able to capture because g5, and then all of a sudden it's a very dangerous position for black. But it's just one of the options that you have for at least trying to bust open the king side. Here we have rook to g8 first, and now comes queen back to c2. We have king to h8 by Leela, king to b1 by Stockfish, and now rook to b8, preparing b5 as planned, and now king to a1. Stockfish decides that it's much safer for the king to be on a1. We have knight e to f6 here, bringing the knight into the game, and now knight to d1. With bishop to a5 as planned, grabbing hold of this very important diagonal, and now comes knight to h4. This was Stockfish's idea, and now if you play pawn captures, then you get bishop captures, and then when this pawn starts marching forward, it will be very dangerous for Leela to defend this position. So after knight to h4, Leela just said, okay, just knight to f8. I'm just going to defend the g6 square, so if your knight ever comes there, I'm just going to grab it. So here we have bishop to f3. Stockfish just blocks this pawn. You don't want to allow f3. Any tactics might be available, but also we should check what happens after knight to g6 check. I mean, it's a very nice check. You're at least busting open the h file, but does it bring you anything after queen captures on g6? Sure, you can go rook h2 check, then the king will just go away. Rook g to h1, you will completely dominate the h file, but black will just ignore you, play b5, continue the attack on the queen side, and you don't really have a good move here. This knight on f6 controls a lot of important squares here, and you don't really have a good follow-up on your sacrifice. So here Stockfish just keeps everything intact with bishop f3. Now comes b5. Leela starts the attack on the queen side. Knight to c3, and now we have queen to e8, trying to bring the queen into the attack as well. Knight to b1, and now comes rook to b7. with knight to f5 by Stockfish, and this is now basically a monster knight, so you do have to eliminate it. You're not gonna just leave it there. There is an exception to this rule. Sometimes a monster knight will just be given away. For example, if you've been on this channel following it ever since we've been covering the Bobby Fischer saga, then you know the famous game between Bobby Fischer and Tigran Petrosian, where Fischer gave up the monster knight for Petrosian's bishop, who wasn't really doing anything, and all the grandmasters were like, wow. And that was really a nice moment. If you haven't, I mean, do check it out. It's a very nice game, but it is one of the exceptions where you will voluntarily give up a monster knight. But okay, bishop captures on f5, we have g captures on f5, and now we have knight 8 to h7. Just, you know, keeping everything in check on the king side, and now Lila hopes to transfer the game on the queen side. With h6, finally this pawn is pushed forward, and now bishop to b4. Here we have queen to e2, and now comes b captures on c4. And here just bishop to, you don't want to capture here. If you capture here, then queen to b5 will be very strong, just bringing the queen into the game. Of course, you don't want to trade here. It would just improve black's pawn structure. So here Stockfish has something else in mind. First, bishop to e1, and now queen to d8, just preparing to bring the queen into the game via queen to a5. Knight to c3 now, and now you can see that even though the b file is semi-open, you don't really have any good options for attack. Let's say if queen b6 and let's say queen c2, you don't really gain anything. Bishop captures, and good luck busting this open. I mean, this b2 pawn is protected like, like a very important pawn. So after knight to c3, we have rook to b8 by Lila, and now king back to b1. We have bishop to a3, threatening to capture here, and now just knight to a4. Stockfish nicely defends everything. We have c3 by Lila, giving up a pawn here. Bishop captures on c3, and now queen to d7, attacking the knight on a4. Queen to d1 defending. We have bishop to b4, offering a trade here, and now just king to a1. We have queen to b7 now, with some very nice pressure along the b file, but the b2 pawn is so nicely protected that you don't really have any ways of busting this queen side. We have queen to c2 by Stockfish, now comes a5. Queen to e2, and now queen to d7. Again, pressuring the knight here, just queen d1 repeating, and now Lila doesn't repeat, but rather c4. So little by little, Lila is making progress. We have a3, pushing the bishop back, but now comes queen to b5, and it is a very nice idea. Of course, if you capture the bishop, then a captures on b4 will just be too strong. I mean, the king is still on a1 after you move the bishop, then rook to a8 will be winning. As you don't really have a good way of defending the knight here, and black's attack will be very strong. So after queen b5, we have queen back to c2. Stockfish just waits and see what happens here, and now queen back to e8. We have bishop to e2, and now queen to d7. So from something that seemed like a very aggressive start to the game, we basically enter a very slow maneuvering game. And now what do you do here? If you capture on c4, then bishop captures on c3 is the idea. After knight captures on c3, then g4, and then Lila just gets a very powerful attack, even on the king side. So after this queen to d7, we have bishop f3. Stockfish just blocks here. And now queen back to b5, with bishop back to d1, and now bishop captures on c3. Knight captures on c3, attacks the queen on b5, we have queen to c5, queen to d2, and now finally queen to d4. Lila now offers a trade of queens, which would improve her pawn structure immensely here in the center. Queen to e1, not allowing this trade, and now queen back to b6, just assuming this very important file. Queen back to d2, and now comes rook to b7, preparing the other rook to come to b8. With a4, now this is a very strong setup for Stockfish here, not very easy to destroy it. We have queen back to c5, and now just queen to e1. And here we have rook to b4. If the knight moves now, the a4 pawn will be vulnerable. Maybe even giving up an exchange is a possibility. Queen back to d2 by Stockfish, and now queen back to b6. We have queen to c1, and now queen to d4 once again. Queen to c2, and now rook to b3 even. And here, again, you have to be careful. If you play something like queen f2 to offer a queen trade, then rook captures on c3 will be very strong. And now you can no longer trade queens due to rook c1 check. First you hide the rook and then you recapture the queen. And now, of course, if you count the pieces, black is just up a piece and, of course, completely winning. So after rook to b3, we have bishop to e2, and now comes rook captures on c3. This was Lila's plan all along. Queen captures on c3, queen captures on c3, b captures on c3, and now, of course, what's the idea behind the exchange sacrifice? Knight captures on e4, just eliminating the base of the pawn chain, now making the d5 and the f5 pawn weak pawns, and then Lila plans to make this massive pawn center just start marching forward. With bishop to f3, if king to b2, if you try and defend the c3 pawn, Lila isn't really interested in the c3 pawn. Lila would just go knight to f6 and then start pushing the pawns, would be very dangerous for white. So we have bishop to f3, and now Lila just goes back with the knight. Knight to f6, and now the idea is the same. g4, of course, and then start pushing the pawns. Bishop back to to e2, and now e4, now preparing f3 this way. With bishop captures on c4, but now g4, and now you can see the three connected pass pawns are more than enough compensation for the exchange sacrifice. We have rook to b2, Stockfish tries to find activity on the queen side, but now knight to g5. We have rook to b6, going after the d6 pawn, but Lila just defends it, knight to f7. We have bishop back to f1, and now comes f3. We have c4 by white, and now comes knight to d7. Attacking the rook, we have rook to b7, and now the other knight takes this knight's place, defending it, and now this knight also blocks the rook's attempt at attacking the e6 pawn. So white, for the moment, is unable to create a pass pawn of its own. We have f6 by white. Okay. White does have a pass pawn, but it's very unlikely that it's actually that these two are actually going somewhere. With e3 now. e2 is the idea, and you really don't have a good way of preventing this. We have rook to b3, but now just e2. Now you do have to give up the piece. We have bishop captures, f captures, and now rook to e3, going after the pawn here. But now, of course, you all see the move, knight to f3, attacking the rook. Also, if you block the pawn, then just knight captures it, and if you don't do it, then the pawn will come to e1, a square which is protected by the knight. So here, Stockfish tried f7, but Lila just blocks, rook to f8. We have rook captures on g4, and now, of course, just e1, bringing a queen into the game, rook captures, knight captures, and here, Stockfish played rook to g6, but it was in this position, as engines usually do, that they both agree that black was simply winning by too much, and it was basically in this position that Stockfish resigned the game. Something we, before we weren't really used to hearing something like this, Stockfish resigned the game, but ever since the appearance of Alpha Zero, this has been, something of a common thing. So yeah, very nice game with the black pieces by Lila Chess Zero in the Tromposky line. If you enjoyed this game, as so many of you have recommended it, we could also show this exact same line where Lila plays it with the white pieces, if you're interested to see how that would turn out. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Tim Seltzer and Michael Carr for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon. Continuing the coverage of the FIDE Grand Prix, continuing the coverage of the Capablanca saga, checking up on Lila, and of course, as this game came by checking up on your suggestions, I will also be checking up on your suggestions. So yeah, that's the game, and yeah. Thank you all. I will see you soon. Have an excellent rest of your day. Hello everyone, and welcome to day 3 of the Julius Baer Generations Cup, and we started off with a game between Arjun Erigaisi and Vasily Ivanchuk, and it's a beautiful game. It's a wonderful miniature. You guys will enjoy it. It's just something to add to every chess book, like we say so many times when the games are so aesthetically pleasing. Now let's check it out. Arjun has the white pieces, and he opens with d4. We have knight to f6, and now bishop to g5. He goes for the Tromposky attack. Vasil goes d6. We have knight to c3, and now knight b to d7, and now pawn to e4. Basically, transposing into some sort of a bishop g5 type of black lion's defense. We have e5 and now knight to f3. We have bishop to e7 and bishop to c4. So all very, very standard ideas here. c6 now trying to get a5 and b5 in. So of course a4 preventing b5. And now both players just castles. So castles, castles, and now pawn to h6, challenging Arjun's bishop here, saying, do you want to capture or do you want to go back? Of course, he's not going to capture. Bishop back to e3, and now rook to e8. And there are some games where h3 and bishop to e2 were played, but here we have rook e1 by Arjun, and it is now, as of move 10, that we have a completely new game. So here, knight to g4, going after the bishop here, and Arjun happily wastes a tempo here by bringing the bishop back to the starting square, but he will now, of course, kick away the knight. So e captures on d4 by Vasil, knight captures on d4, and here bishop to f6. And this is a very, very, very tricky position. Point being that the knight is still on d7 and the bishop is not controlling the f5 square. So of course the f5 square is now available for Arjun's knight. I will just show a fun line, as obviously something you have to know if you're playing the black lion. For example, if in this position you play knight to c5, which is very nice, then what happens is it's just very different, because the bishop now controls the f5 square, and the standard idea of basically refuting the knight being on c5 b4 in this position does not work, because here you would have bishop h4 going after the f2 pawn, and okay, you kick away the bishop g3, but now bishop to f6, and it seems like you're giving up a piece, but really you're not, because once you've played b4, the knight on c3 is no longer defended. So now if b captures on c5, d captures, the knight is attacked and has to move. Let's say knight f5, queen captures on d1, rook captures, and after bishop captures on f5, e captures, black finishes with a nice bishop captures on c3, that's attacking the rook, and you get this position where black is up a pawn and very, very happy with his position. So knight to c5 definitely much a better idea, or even knight d to e5, but the bishop to f6 allows Arjun to really take advantage of the position. He plays knight to f5 now, puts pressure on the d6 pawn, and it makes sense for Vasil to move the knight. So he plays knight to b6. Again, the e5 is the correct square for the knight, but he plays knight to b6, attacks the bishop, and now Arjun just completely obliterates Vasil from the board. He plays bishop captures on f7 with check, and now okay, you have to capture as the rook would be hanging, so king captures, now queen captures on g4, and now bishop captures on c3, b captures on c3, and while the position is still playable, but you have to play it with bishop captures on f5. If you play this, then queen captures with check, queen f6, and okay, we trade queens, and now you get this position where Arjun would be up a pawn, he would have a bishop against the knight, but still he has a very damaged pawn structure. Okay, white would be better, but he would have to really prove that he can do something with this position. However, after queen to f6, it is not possible to come back from this, because here Arjun plays queen to h5 with check, and now how do you play this? If you play g6, of course, then just knight captures on h6, you lose the pawn with check, and after king g7, you just bring the queen back, and everything is perfectly fine. The knight is nicely defended. Black's king side is completely ruined. It will be a very, very easy win for white. So instead, after queen to h5 check, king to f8 is played by Ivanchuk, and now there is a beautiful, beautiful idea. So feel free to pause the video and win the game for Arjun already on move 17 while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding either of the two ideas, either knight captures on g7 or knight captures on d6, as you are truly an amazing tactician. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, this is what Arjun played, knight captures on d6. In case you're wondering, if you capture here, point is if queen captures, then bishop captures on h6, wins the queen here. And of course, if you don't capture with the queen, if you capture with the king, then the rook on e8 hangs. So that's the problem. But Arjun goes for a different plan. He plays knight captures on d6, now making queen captures impossible, because the bishop can trap the queen from this side as well. That's the power of the bishop. When you're wondering, is the bishop better than knight? Bishop can do quite a lot using the entire board. However, he can only do it on one color squares. Knight doesn't have that much firepower. However, he can go wherever he pleases. pleases, just not very quickly. So here, after knight captures on d6, rook to e5, attacking the queen here, and now just queen back to d1. We have king to g8, moving the king away from this nasty diagonal, but now a spectacular move by Arjun, just taking, just absolutely taking the most out of the position, pawn to a5, spectacular. The knight has no squares, of course all of these squares are covered, and if you go to d7, then just knight captures on c8, removes the defender of the knight, then queen picks up the knight, absolutely crushing. So knight to d5 is played, trying to give up the material this way, but first knight captures on c8, knight captures on c3, at least you will do something before you give up material, but now queen d7 defends the knight here, knight captures on e4, and now bishop to e3. There's really no move here. You are just without any good ideas here. And now after queen f7, Arjun very happily trades. Queen captures on f7, king captures, and now he finishes again with the absolutely most precise move, bishop to d4. And he was in this position on move 25 that Vasily Ivanchuk resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. In modern times, a win in 25 or under moves is considered a miniature, so definitely, you know, well deserved for especially when playing against a genius like Ivanchuk here. And this also means that Arjun extends his lead, as he was leading going into the third day, ahead of Magnus and Pragnananda. So we'll see if he can take it all the way. But yeah, here he resigned because the rook is attacked. Once the rook moves, doesn't really matter where, you're just going to play rook captures on e4, and that's it. Now if rook captures, a nice fork picks up the rook as well. Now king e6 captures, here you're up a bishop and the knight. And even if you don't accept this, for example, if rook e8 and rook captures on e4, you could also capture the knight here. Doesn't matter, you just trade, captures, you pick up the a7 pawn, and still you are up a full piece. Of course, this is completely winning, so Ivanchuk does not want to play this. He says, I'm just, you know, I'm done, good game, young sir, and he resigns. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and that maybe you've you know, the black line defense, and also if a similar position arises from the Tromposky like it did here, can be a bit of a problem. You know, for players, there are some ideas like you can counter it with a4, a5, and then, you know, maybe some just standard moves, but also you can see that if black doesn't really know how to remaneuver those knights back into the game, you can fall victim to a very sharp attack very early on. So that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Big congratulations to Arjun for such a spectacular victory. I would like to thank Marcello De Baros, Paul Sertanovic, Ante Butigan is Dalmatia, Francis Air, and Guia Para La Paz Interior for contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of this spectacular event until it finishes. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. Hello everyone, and welcome to a really interesting game that took place in the Chess24 Banter Blitz match between Magnus Carlsen and Grandmaster Pepe Cuenca. Now, this is round 2. In round 1, Pepe Cuenca defeated his opponent, Georgian Grandmaster Levan Pansulaya, with a score of 9-0. So Magnus definitely took this match seriously. And this is a game, well, obviously from the match, it's the first game of the match, and it's one where Magnus said that he's just going to try a quick attack, showing little to no respect, as the position allowed it. So without further ado, let's check it out. Magnus opens with d4, with knight to f6 and bishop to g5. He goes for the Tromposky, and he mentions briefly that he didn't check what Cuenca plays, so that's why he's going to go for a slow line. d5 and knight to d2. Most common is just captures on f6. So knight to d2, we have e6, e3, and now bishop to e7. Just making room for castling. We have c3, and now Cuenca castles. Bishop to d3 by Magnus, and b6. Now preparing bishop to b7 and the knight to e4. We have f4 by Magnus, grabbing more control of the e5 square. Bishop to b7, and now Magnus mentions in the video that he decides to capture on f6. He doesn't want to allow the knight to land on e4. So just bishop captures, and the knight g to f3. We have c5 by black, and now h4. And already Magnus mentions that maybe some bishop to h7 action is possible here. What he means by this is if black plays something like knight d7, he can sacrifice the bishop on h7, and if king captures, knight g5 will be very strong. The queen can come to h5, and it's a well-known bishop sacrifice, where if you go back with the king, then just queen h5, and black will have big difficulties defending this position. If you capture, just h captures, you open up the h file for the rook, so you'd have to play something like this, but then you allow queen captures on f7, and then after the king moves, the knight comes to f3, and is just a very strong position for white, which would of course be winning in the end. So here, even if you allowed it, you would have to go for something like captures, knight g5 check, king h6. And even though this is good for black, in a 3-minute blitz game, it should not be playable, especially not against a strong grandmaster, and especially not against a world chess champion. Your king is stuck on h6, and you will waste a lot of time trying to defend this. So after h4, Cuenca goes for h6, he just defends it. We have g4, preparing g5, and bishop to e7. So if g5 comes, you can advance the pawn to h5. You don't have to worry about your piece being under attack. We have g5 by Magnus, and now h5. Of course, you don't want to open up lines in front of your king, and now knight to e5 and g6 are both excellent moves. Magnus decides to go for g6, and now f captures on g6. If you try f5 to try to keep the position close, just knight e5, and then it's a pretty straightforward victory for white. So after g6, we have f captures on g6, bishop captures on g6, and now knight to d7. We have knight to g5. Again, black doesn't achieve anything by trading here. You just open up the h file for your rook, and then it's just over. So here, knight to f6 adds another defender to the position. You will be controlling the h7 square, which is really important. And also, you're not just allowing the queen to infiltrate with queen captures on h5. And here, Cuenca allows knight captures on e6, but Magnus isn't interested in winning material, since if something like this, then yes, he wins the exchange, but he developed all of black's pieces, and he doesn't want to do that. He prefers to keep the initiative. So bishop captures on h5, and now comes queen to d6, developing, and now the other rook can also come into the game, plus he wants to exchange light square bishops with this maneuver. So bishop to g6, now Magnus makes room for the h-pawn to start marching forward. We have bishop to c6 with the plan of bishop to e8, and now h5. With bishop to e8, and now queen to b1, a nice move that allows white to continue the advancement of the h-pawn, because now the bishop is protected, and you're just going to push here, capture, open up the h-file, and continue in that fashion. Capturing doesn't do anything, as the queen very easily takes the bishop's place, and then just h6. So we have c captures on d4, and now while h6 is possible immediately, you don't want to waste too much time calculating in a 3-minute blitz game. So c captures on d4, and rook to c8. And here, it's best for white to just capture on e8, but Magnus decides to push h6 right away, and this allows Pepe Cuenca a very interesting, exchange sacrifice that allows him to stay in the game. So here he plays rook to c1 with check, removes the defender of the bishop on g6, so you have to capture it, queen captures, and now bishop captures on g6. That's why it was better just capture and then push h6, as you would not have this maneuver. So we have bishop captures on g6, h captures on g7, king captures, and now knight d comes to f3. Magnus also briefly mentions that queen to c7, also playable, where black would have to trade queens, and then you just grab another pawn with check, and then you pick up the queen. You're up the exchange, so you can just go into an endgame, but he goes for this line instead, knight df3. Queen b4 with check, with king to f2, and now knight to g4 with check. King g3, the king is very safe there, and now knight to h6, coming to f5 with check, but here Magnus just plays knight captures on e6, and it was in this position that Pepe Cuenca resigned the game, as there is nothing more he can do here. The rook is under attack. If the king moves, you can pick up the knight, you can come to c7 with the queen, so it's just an unplayable position for black. So this is the first game of the match. Magnus won it, and in the end, after 9 games, the result was 8.5 to half for Magnus. So one game was drawn, the other 8 games were won by Magnus, and yes, I don't know if you've heard, but Magnus Carlsen is currently, I don't know if he still is, but today he posted that he is the #1 player in the world in fantasy league football, whatever that is. I don't know, I haven't played it, but sounds like, well, if you're first in anything in the world, that's worth mentioning. So just thought I'd put it in there as well. And also, if you are interested in checking out the other games from this match, I will put a link in the description below with a link to the Chess24 website where you can check it all out. And also, if you want to check out the exact video of Magnus Carlsen's stream, I will also put that in the description, so you can also check that out. So yeah, that's the game. A very nice attack, and it really was a quick attack where a little to no respect was shown. So there you have it. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Rohan Polidano, Matt Beckwith, Scott Incel, Sick GmbH, and Rohan Banchali for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon. Continuing with the coverage of the, well, FIDE Grand Prix, checking up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world, such as this match here. And do be a part of the subscribers video 2020. It's gonna be awesome. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. Hello everyone, and welcome to the final game of day 1 between Vladislav Artemiev and Levon Aronian. This is game 4, and now Artemiev is in a must-win situation in order to tie the first match, because Levon won the previous game, as you've seen, really a crazy one. If you haven't, do check it out. I will put a link to it in the description below. Just a really crazy 25 move game. Artemiev just well, he didn't think much of the attack, and then it just happened, and that was it. But here now Artemiev will get a chance with the white pieces to bounce back, and let's see what happens, because this one is well, I would say just as short, but it's not, but it kind of is, but you'll see what I mean. So Artemiev with the white pieces opens with d3. We have knight to f6, and now bishop to g5. He goes for the Tromposky attack. We have d5, knight to d2, and now c5, of course, striking in the center. We have e3, and now c captures on d4. We have e captures and the bishop to g4 now, attacking Artemiev's queen. We have knight to f3, defending while developing. We have e6, and now there is one game in the database where c3 was played, but here we have h3, and it is now already, as of move 7, that we have a completely new game. So here the bishop is challenged. What do? You could go back with bishop to f5, bishop to h5, but here Levon decides to trade. We have captures, and just bishop to d6. Nicely continuing development, and he's saying, I'm not really worried about this. This is nothing. So bishop to d3, and now knight to c6. We have c3 defending the d4 pawn, and queen to c7 now. Levon saying, I might castle kingside, but I also might castle queenside, depending on what you do. So here Artemiev castled kingside, and we have castles queenside by Levon. And now, of course, black will try to attack on the kingside, whereas Artemiev will try to attack on the queenside. So who will be faster here? It's definitely the kind of position Artemiev would want, since he needs a win here, but it's, well, a very double-edged position, as you'll see. We have rook to c1. Now, always a useful move, aligning the rook with the queen and the king that are on the same file. So Levon has to sidestep this. We have king to b8, and now b4. Now preparing a pawn storm here on the queen side. We have h6. Black does the same. So now you don't want to go bishop to h4 and allow g5 with tempo. So bishop all the way back to e3 and g5 now. g4 is coming, as you have nice support for this with your knight. And now b5, attacking the knight here. Knight to a5, and now knight to d2, taking care of these squares. And later on you might play queen to a4, c4, and so on, trying to make a breakthrough here. And now Levon plays knight to c4, which is very interesting, because like I said, these are castles on opposite sides. You want to play g4, you want to bust open the position, you know, much quicker than your opponent can do the same on the queen side. But he says, nope, there's no rush. I'm going to play knight to c4 first, trade off a pair of knights here. Or rather trade off a pair of pieces, because white captures with the bishop. So bishop captures, d captures, and now queen to a4. Now preparing a very nasty trick here. He wants to push d5 and then, well, do some damage here. So rook to c8. Levon not worried about this. He just adds another defender to the pawn here. And d5 now, threatening checkmate with queen captures on a7. And now comes b6. You have to defend against this. We have d captures on e6 now, f captures, and now knight to f3. And the white's position here is not pretty. You don't have a good way of continuing the attack. You, in order to make some sort of a breakthrough on the queen side, you need to move your queen, then push the a pawn all the way, and that takes a lot of moves. So here he goes knight to f3. He wants to play knight to d4 and then bring the knight over to c6. If he can do this without damaging his position too much, then could be great for him. But Levon now doesn't miss the opportunity. He advances the pawn to g4. We have h captures, knight captures, and now knight to d4, going after this c6 square. But here, well, we've just reached the position from the thumbnail. I'm just gonna prepare this. Feel free to pause the video and try to find a crushing win here for Levon while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting that there are some checkmating patterns here. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's bishop to h2 with check. It's important to bring the king to h1 first, and now only now after the king moves to h1, we are going to, well, play either queen to e5 or queen to f7. Doesn't really matter because we just want to get our queen to h5, and we can do this both via the f7 and the e5 square. So let's say queen to f7, and there's really no defense here. Whatever white does, you're going to play queen to h5, and there's no defense. There is nothing you can play here. It's completely the same whatever you play here. If you go knight to c6 check, we can even capture it. Doesn't matter. And if pawn captures, queen to h5, and that's it. There's no defense. Bishop g1, bishop f4, g3, bishop anywhere just delivers checkmate. So this was in the position, but like I said, Artemiev was very low on time. He was already down to 3 minutes, and maybe Levon figured out, okay, Artemiev calculated that this doesn't work. He spent a lot of time, and it's maybe not all that simple to spot this queen maneuver that you have to bring the queen to h5. But okay, Levon played rook h to f8 instead. He brought another attacker into the game, and now knight to c6 with check. But it's okay. Levon says my king is perfectly fine on a8. We have queen captures on c4, but now the problem is the same idea doesn't work. Levon does go bishop h2 check, king h1, but now you don't have queen here. Okay, you can't play queen here because of the knight, but queen f7 loses the queen captures on g4, which was impossible as the black pawn was still on c4, but now that white captured it, it no longer works. So here Levon plays bishop to g1, now threatens queen to h2 checkmate, and he doesn't even have to look for a win here. He only needs a draw, and he's the winner of the first match. So g3 stopping checkmate, but now knight captures on e3. And you can't grab this knight, because if you do, then queen captures on g3, and checkmate is coming. If you capture the bishop, then this is checkmate, and there's not much you can do here. So instead, after knight captures on e3, queen to e4 was played, now threatening a lot of nasty discoveries here, but Levon says, nope, that simply will not do. I'm just going to capture your rook. So knight captures on f1, and I might even use this for a thumbnail. I mean, it's also a really nice one. So yeah, after knight captures on f1, we have knight to d8 check. And there are a lot of possible discoveries, but you want to make sure you do the right one. So here we have knight to d8 check, and now you can't really do all that much. You can't block because the knight and the queen covered the g7 square. So you have to play this, and now Artemiev just repeats. Knight to c6. We have king to a8. But like we said, a draw is enough for Levon to win the first match, so Artemiev has to play on. So rook captures on f1, but now just bishop captures on f2. And now if you continue past this point without going for the perpetual, you're just going to lose the game. So here Artemiev was forced to go into a perpetual. Knight d8 check, king b8, knight c6 check, king b8, knight to a5 check. Now is the same. King to b8, knight to c6 check, king to a8, and he was in this position on move 35 that Artemiev and Aronian agreed to a draw, as there is nothing more to be done here for white, at least, because he has to repeat this in order not to lose the game. Black would be very happy to get a move in, but yeah. That's the first match. We were able to cover most of the games. Well, three out of four, and I've shown you what happened in game one. So that's pretty much all that happened. Artemiev had an amazing chance in game 2, and he kept on pushing, but Levon somehow survived. As you've seen, you know, whenever you have, if you still have a knight, you have a chance. That's how it goes. And then, you know, in game 3, he just obliterated Artemiev, and now in game 4, Artemiev tried, but it simply wasn't enough. By creating an attack, you also allowed Black to create an attack, and it's interesting that Levon missed that beautiful sequence, but this one definitely a position to show your friends at the bar in the library, because the queen maneuver is something maybe to remember that could be used, you know, in your own games in the future. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Lance Hassan, Connor Clark, James Walker, Peter Milner, and Wolfgang Schmidt for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing with the other match of the semifinals, of the finals, or rather, the battle for the 3rd place between Magnus and Ding. Well, tomorrow we continue with the 2nd day of the finals. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your weekend. Hello everyone, and welcome to another very nice game from the TCEC Super Final Season 15. It's Lila Chess 0 with the white pieces against Stockfish. A lot of you have requested this game, and we already mentioned in the previous game that we've shown from this matchup that if you enjoyed that one where Lila played that line with the black pieces, maybe you would like to see the one where she played with the white pieces. So it's the exact same line, but the game is completely different. So if you haven't seen game 61, a brilliant game that Lila won with the black pieces, do check it out. It will be the first link in the description below. So just to get into the mood of this top chess engine competition, do check that out before watching this game. So if you have done that, congratulations, you are an excellent, you know, prepare for the next game. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, well, you can also just watch the second one. But that being said, Lila opens the game with d4. So it's the exact same line as where Stockfish had white and Lila had black. Knight f6, we have bishop to g5. You remember the nice Tromposky line, knight e4, attacking the bishop, bishop back to f4, and now c5. f3, kicking the knight back. Now we had this check, of course c3 blocks, and now knight goes back to f6. We have d5, and here queen to b6. And now you remember that we already mentioned the pawn is under attack. You can't defend with the queen because you also have to keep an eye on the d5 pawn. So bishop to c1, the same as in the game where Lila had the black pieces, and here's where we deviate. The opening has been prearranged up until this point, every 2 games is the same, and here d6 was played by Lila, but here Stockfish goes for a different line. Stockfish goes for e6, and it's now a completely different game than the one we've had where Lila had the black pieces. We have e4 by Lila, e captures on d5, e captures on d5, and only now d6. We have c4 by Lila, solidifying here in the center, g6, preparing to fianchetto the dark square bishops, and now comes queen to e2 check by Lila. And now you don't want to block. Of course, you can't block with the bishop due to the d5 pawn, but if you block with bishop to e7, then bishop to h6 is very unpleasant. You're not really gonna castle. You will still have to waste the tempo unpinning this king, and it's just not a very nice position for black. So here, after queen to e2, we have king to d8. Stockfish loses the castling privilege, but Stockfish has plans of castling artificially later on in the game, as you'll see. So here there is one game in the database where queen to c2 was played, Sergei Movsesian versus Vasilios Kotronias in 2007 Aeroflot Open, but here Lila goes queen back to d1. You have to make room for your light square bishop to be developed, and it is now from move 12 that we have a completely new game. Bishop to g7 by Stockfish, now have bishop to d3, and now knight f to d7. This knight is now preparing to come to e5 to harass the bishop and the c4 pawn from there. We have knight to e2 by Lila, knight to e5 as planned, and now knight b to c3. Like we mentioned, you can't protect the bishop by, let's say, bishop c2, because you have to keep an eye on the c4 pawn. So just knight b to c3, Lila continues development, and the bishop to d7. We have castles by Lila, and now knight to a6. Here, making room for the king on c7, the rook can now come into the game, and then the king can go back to safety on b8. We have b3, preparing to fianchetto the dark square bishop, also putting more defense to the c4 pawn. Now comes king to c7 as planned, a3 now, with rook a to e8 and bishop back to c2. Now Lila is no longer interested in allowing this tension to be in Stockfish's favor with bishop to c2, as now we already said that the b3 pawn defends the c4 pawn. And king to b8. So you can see that it took Stockfish a while, but Stockfish was able to artificially castle, even though it took him some 6 moves to castle. But the king is now very safe, and now Stockfish can go, let's say, f5, g5, g4, and start the attack on the king side. With h3 by Lila, and now f5, preparing g5 and g4 at some point. With f4 by Lila, pushing the knight back, also stopping g5 for the moment, knight back to f7, and now rook to b1. Here now Lila is ready to push b4 and start the attack on the queen side. We have rook h to g8, and now not immediately b4, because then this capture comes with check. First you have to deal with your king. So after this rook h to g8 by Stockfish, king to h1 first, and now queen to d8. Stockfish doesn't want the queen on the same file as Lila's rook. We have bishop to d2, grabbing more control of the b4 square, and now queen to e7. Now this knight can't really move because you have to keep an eye on this knight, and now bishop back to d3, putting more defense to this knight here. With knight back to d8, preparing b6, and after b6 this knight wants to come to b7 and control the a5 square, which will be very important after Lila starts the attack on the queen side. And finally b4. Everything is, all the pieces are set perfectly, and Lila is now ready to start the attack. We have b6 as planned, and now, although you want your b file open for the rook, capturing here after knight captures doesn't really do all that much. After bishop to c2 and knight b7, you will have a very hard time breaking this structure here, and you will not be able to continue your attack successfully. a4, knight comes to a5, and it's just a better position for black. So after b6, Lila goes b5, pushes back the knight, and now wants to bust open the position with a4 and a5. With knight to c7, and now not a4 immediately, then again knight to b7 would be very strong. First queen to c2, bishop to f6, now putting more pressure to the g5 square, and only now a4 by Lila. Knight b7, a nice defensive move by Stockfish, and now knight back to c1. Maybe preparing knight to b3 and then start pushing a5. The bishop from d2 will also very nicely be controlling the a5 square, and since this knight will no longer be on e2, this knight can also move. With g5, Stockfish now likes the position of his pieces and starts the attack on the king side. With f captures on g5, bishop captures on g5, and now knight back to e2. And here it's important to eliminate the dark square bishop, as the dark square bishop controls the a5 square. So bishop captures on d2, we have queen captures on d2, and now knight to a5, preventing any pawn pushing on the queen side. And now that Stockfish prevented Lila from successfully attacking on the queen side, now Lila transfers the plans to the king side with rook to f3, h5 now, and now rook b to f1. So nicely doubling rooks on the f file, and now h4. We have rook 1 to f2, everything is nicely defended now, and the rook e to f8, and queen to h6. And here you have to decide what to do. Lila is putting pressure on this pawn here. There's also pressure on this pawn here, and you have to be very quick to react to defend all of them. First, knight to e8, putting more defense to the d6 pawn, and now comes rook to e3. The queen is now under attack, and you will not be able to defend everything. Okay, the knight still is guarding this pawn, and you can play queen d8 to keep an eye on this pawn here, but then you get knight to f4. This knight is now coming here. It's going to be very unpleasant. If rook h8, attacking the queen, then knight e6, just the same. If rook captures, knight captures here, the trade will be in Lila's favor, and if bishop captures, then queen captures on e6, knight g7, attacking queen e7, and it will be just a better position for Lila. So Stockfish finds a more active way to treat this position, not queen to d7, but rather queen to f6, offering a trade of queens. We have queen captures on f6, knight captures on f6, and now rook to f4. Lila now puts pressure on the h4 pawn, and again, if Stockfish goes with the passive rook h8, then just king h2, this rook is coming to d7, and it's just going to be a super active position for Lila. So after f4, rook f4, Stockfish goes for a temporary pawn sacrifice with bishop to c8. He frees the d7 square for black knight. The knight is now coming to d7 and then to e5, from e5 both the a5 knight and the e5 knight will go after the c4 pawn. So Lila grabs the pawn, we have rook captures on h4, which is now already very dangerous. The dh pawn is now a passed pawn. We have knight to d7 as planned, and now knight to f4, going for the e6 square, and now knight to e5. So for the moment, this pawn is now under attack. You have to react to this. We have knight to e6, attacking the rook, and now both the bishop and the rook are defending the c4 pawn. So first rook to f6, now threatening to win the knight and the pawn after the pawn is recaptured, and now just bishop back to f1. And not allowing knight captures and keeping an eye on the g2 pawn. We have rook back to e8, and now comes rook to g3. And now, finally, bishop captures on e6. D captures on e6, we have rook f captures on e6, and only now knight to d5. So, Black Knight has the excellent e5 square, but Lila now created an excellent d5 square as an outpost, which is a little bit more important than this knight being on e5. It's so far away from the king, and there's not much action going on there. Whereas Lila's knight on d5 is very, very close to all the pawns. There are, a lot of sneaky ideas here. Maybe you can, if, everything is traded off and the kings are all on the king side, maybe you can just sacrifice here, push a5, and then after black captures, start pushing this pawn. It's just better as there's more going on there. First we have rook to g6. Stockfish offers a trade of rooks. Rook back to c3. Now defending this pawn, the knight and this rook can now be activated, as you no longer have to defend here. You can start activating with rook to h7. We have rook to g7, and now comes rook to h6, going after this pawn here. Rook to g6 blocking, and now rook back to h4, and here rook to f8. We have rook to f4, preventing this pawn from being pushed, and now rook back to f7. We have bishop to e2, hoping to win the exchange with bishop to h5, but now just rook to g5. King to h2, Lila improves the position of the king, and now knight back to g6, attacks Lila's rook. Rook to f2, and now knight back to e5, and here rook to f1 by Lila. Rook back to g8, you could try something like this to go after this pawn, but then g3 will just be very strong. The rook guards the g3 pawn, and you can now start pushing your h pawn. So after rook f1, we have rook back to g8, and now comes rook to f4. Rook g to f8, doubling up on the f file, and now rook to g3. Now, again, this rook and this bishop are guarding the c4 pawn, so for the moment, black has no way of capturing it. We have rook to h8, and now comes king back to g1. We have king to c8, Stockfish also now tries to bring the king into the game, but rook to g5. And here, there are problems for black. Lila managed to wiggle in this rook to attack the f5 pawn, and you don't have a good way of defending it. If you play something like rook h to f8, to defend it twice, then bishop to h5 is very strong. You force the rook away, the knight is controlling the f6 square, so after you move it, then comes the bishop g6, just a nice monster move, where you will win the f5 pawn after you capture it, and of course if knight captures, then it's just a much better position for white. You're attacking this pawn, and there's no good way to defend it. If you try and defend it with the king, then just knight f6, check, will win the rook on h7. If you try this, then it's just a very passive rook. You're gonna go g4, and white will just be winning here. You can't capture because the rook captures on f8, and then after black plays anything, you'll play either g5 or capture here and start pushing your passed pawns to victory. So after rook g5, we have knight to b3 by Stockfish, now trying to do something. This knight no longer has a purpose there. You're trying to reintroduce it into the game. We have rook g captures on f5, rook captures on f5, and now not capturing here, because then knight here attacks the rook and the bishop, would be very unfortunate. Rook f2, knight captures on e2, rook captures, and now rook to h4 will just be very strong for black, as both the knight and the rook are now attacking the c4 pawn. So after rook captures on f5, knight to e7 check. That was the idea. King to d7, and now just knight captures, recaptures on f5. We have knight to c1 attacking the bishop, and now bishop to f1, just keeping an eye on the squares that this knight can use to get back into the game. Rook f2, and now g4. So now, after all is said and done, Lila is up a pawn, but more importantly, Lila has two connected passed pawns on the king side. Stockfish has no pawns on the king side, which is just very strong. Knight back to b3, and now rook to f2. We have knight to d2, trying to get this pawn on c4. Of course, if you capture the knight f3, check picks up the rook, so that's not possible. We have bishop to g2, and now we have knight d captures on c4. Capturing this c4 pawn here. But here, Leela has another monster move. Feel free to pause the video here and try to find it. It's not a tactic or anything, it's just a very strong positional idea, which really owns the board, so to say. So feel free to pause the video and try to find this very nice move for white. I'll give you a couple of seconds. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations. You are just an excellent finder of these super moves. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's bishop to d5. And it's just a beautiful idea. A nice centralizing move that prevents black from making any moves. Now, you can't move this knight, as you're going to lose the knight on c4. The knight on c4 is not protected, of course, after this knight moves. And it's also one of the principles. You never want your knights to guard each other, especially in a position like this. And the problem with moving this knight, okay, since this knight is guarded by the pawn, there are no immediate dangers there. You don't have a good square for it. You can't go here, you can't go here, you can't go here. e3 is guarded by the knight. d2 and b2 are guarded by white's rook, as you can see here. And you can go a3 or a5, but you know, good luck coming back into the game after a3. And what are you going to do on a5? This knight basically spent the entire game on a5, and you know, it just made a few moves trying to get back into the game, and now it's gonna go back to a5. Not really something. So here you don't have a good move. Here king to c7. Stockfish now has to wait and see what Leela does. Rook to a2, and now again, there's no good move here. If you just try and repeat moves, let's say king d7, white will just start bringing the king into the game. King h2, if you play this, king g3, if you play it back, h4, h5, king can come all the way into the game and just simply win. So, Stockfish tries knight to a5. It's ugly, but it's a move. We have king to h2, and now rook to e8. And now comes g5, preparing to push this pawn all the way. And not only on d5 did the bishop do all of those things, but also it guards the g8 square, which is, of course, the queening square for the g pawn. Rook back to f8, now comes knight to h4, getting the knight out of harm's way. Rook back to d8 now, preparing rook to d7 to control the g7 square. g6, rook to d7, guarding the g7 square. And now rook to g2, preparing to push it all the way. Here we have rook to g7, blocking the pawn. But now, as well, once you have to use the rook to block the pawn and you're down a pawn, it's not a great position to be in. So now, most likely all of you would be expecting, yes, the rook is now here, we have a knight here, why not knight to f5, we just push it away, well, for the moment it doesn't work, because both the rook and the knight are, both the rook and the knight are attacking the g6 pawn. But here, again, Leela just finds a brilliant move, and feel free to pause the video again and try to find it. I'll give you a couple of seconds. It's even nicer than the previous one. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations, you are an excellent king marcher. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, the move is actually king to g3. And I know what you're thinking, but what about the g6 pawn? Well, if rook captures, then knight captures rook, of course. And of course, if knight captures, then king back to h2, and now you lose the piece here. Either rook will capture, or you will have to play something, capture the knight, and then just rook captures on g7 with check, and it's all over. So, a brilliant move by Leela, king to g3, and now you can see that you cannot prevent this march. King is coming to f6, and it's a game over. We have c4, Stockfish starts pushing the passed pawn, but now king to f4. We have knight to b3, and now just king to g5. We have knight to c5, and now king to h6, attacking the rook, and now you can't move the rook. If you move the rook, well, you can go here, bishop guards there. If you just move it, then the pawn continues marching forward. So we have knight captures on g6, and now, although you can capture with the rook, but it would... It is winning, but it would take Leela somewhat longer to win this game. After c3, you would have to go knight f4, c2, knight e2, block the c1 square, knight captures on a4, and Of course, it is winning, but it would take some time. So Lila just played knight captures on g6. This rook is now coming to pick up the passed pawn, so no surprises there. We have rook back to d7, and now comes rook to c2. We have rook to d8, now comes, sorry, not e7, rook to d8, and now comes rook captures on c4. Rook to e8, and now h4. We have rook to e3, now comes h5, rook to d3 attacking the bishop, and here, as it is in these engine games, when both Lila and Stockfish decide that the evaluation goes over some point, that there is no point in continuing, it is basically in this point that Stockfish resigned the game, or they both agreed that Stockfish was losing, and then the game was over. And a lot of you have, not a lot of you, but some of you have said that I should have mentioned it in the previous game, game 61 between Stockfish and Lila, where Lila had the black pieces, that it was very interesting how Lila's evaluation was showing that Lila was winning, but at the same time Stockfish's evaluation was showing that it was pretty much a drawn game, so that's why the game lasted as much as it did, and you know, it took Stockfish a while to realize that Stockfish was losing. But here I don't know what was the evaluation during the game for Lila and for Stockfish, but if any of you do know, do share, and I will of course give you a heart or pin your comment so everyone else can enjoy these nice facts as well. So not only did Lila win game 61 and game 62, which is huge, winning the same line with the white pieces and the black pieces, so it means that it's not a problem with the line. Lila is just the superior chess entity. And not only that, Lila won the entire super final. Last season, in season 14, Stockfish won the super final. Lila won the tournament, and then after Lila started the match with the superior version of Stockfish, from 100 games, the result was, I believe, 50.5 to 49.5. So Stockfish won by 1 point margin. But here in season 15, after 100 games, Lila won 53.5 to 46.5, which is just insane. Defeating Stockfish like that, it's well, I think it's just something that we're going to have to get used to. Ever since Alpha Zero versus Stockfish, we've learned that self-learning neural networks are probably the future of chess and not your standard engines like Stockfish. And I don't know if Lila will participate in the next season of the Top Chess Engine competition, as now it's pretty obvious that she will win and both the championship and the super final. But I hope that they continue and to see how strong she can get. And maybe, who knows, if the good people in DeepMind will maybe like this, maybe we'll even have a nice short match, at least let's say 10 games between Lila and Alpha. Alpha would probably win all the games, but it would still be super enjoyable to watch and try to make sense of the moves. But yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, if you haven't seen it, do check out the previous game, game 61, also very enjoyable. I would like to thank Trevi Derviraj, Dhananjay Bradravaj, and Nicolas Padao for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon with some more, hopefully, interesting content. We have, the Grand Prix finals to check out, and while we're waiting for the Norway Altibox Championship, we're going to be continuing the Capablanca saga. Thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. Hello everyone, and the good news everyone. The books I ordered on the 1972 World Chess Championship match between Bobby Fischer and Boris Spassky in Reykjavik have almost arrived. I believe tomorrow or a day after tomorrow they will arrive. The one by Svetozar Gligoric and the other one by Larry Evans, so we'll be returning to our Bobby Fischer series fairly soon. Until that happens, I decided to check up on some of your other suggestions. Several of them were about yesterday's match, Speed Chess Championship match on chess.com between Polish Grandmaster Jan Krzysztof Duda and 2015 Blitz World Champion Alexander Grishuk. So definitely a tough matchup and a very serious matchup for young Grandmaster Duda. Who is, well, you could say that he is a prodigy, a chess prodigy, as he did get his Grandmaster title at the age of 15. And this is the this is the quarterfinals of the championship. So we're going to talk about the results of the match after this game a bit more. So without further ado, Duda has the white pieces and he opens with d4. We have knight to f6 and bishop to g5. Duda goes for the Tromposky attack. We have g6, bishop captures on f6, early giving up of the bishop pair. E captures on f6, and now c4. So black will now have the bishop pair, but his pawn structure has been somewhat compromised. d5, c captures on d5, queen captures on d5, and now knight to c3. Queen back to d8, as the queen was attacked, and now comes e3. A very nice principled move, placing all of your pawns on dark squares, as you do only have a light square bishop to develop. Bishop to e7, bishop to c4, and now c6. Again, a nice move by Grishuk, controlling the knight here, and also preparing some queenside expansion. Knight g to e2, and now bishop to d6. As Duda decided to develop the knight via e3 and not via e2 and not via f3, Grishuk decides the bishop will be much better placed on d6. So now perhaps castling kingside would be a bit too premature, as black already would have a nice bishop here to attack the kingside. So instead Duda goes h4. Now if Grishuk decides to castle kingside, then Duda already has a pawn on h4, and he can simply start attacking it via a pawn to h5. If you've ever used, for example, Chessmaster, I believe it's Chessmaster 11 Grandmaster Edition, there is a very nice academy by Josh Waitzkin there, and he would often mention that when he was younger, his coach Bruce Pandolfini often called this H-pawn a ram, sort of like a battering ram that's used to knock down doors on castles. I always thought that was a very nice piece of information. So there you have it. We have h5. Grishuk doesn't allow this h5 to happen from white. Queen to c2, and now knight to d7. As this is a blitz game, the entire Speed Chess Championship match is sort of first you play a couple of blitz games until you run out of time, then you play like 3 minutes games, and then after that you play bullet games. This is from the 5 minutes and 1 second increment section, and here it would be easy to blunder since it is a blitz game. For example, if you castle, notice that the f pawn is pinned, so queen captures on g6 would be more than enough to win you the game here for white. So okay, after queen c2, knight to d7, we have queenside castle, and now knight to b6. Grishuk attacks the bishop on c4, bishop to b3, and now queen to e7. Castling is still out of the question due to the same queen g6 idea. King to b1, and now king to f8. A very nice idea by Grishuk. Grishuk decides now to castle artificially, as we already saw what happens if you just castle. E4 by Duda, and now comes king to g7 as planned. We have king to a1. You don't want to keep your king and queen on the same diagonal when black has a dark square bishop. It could a bishop to f5 move, for example, could be very unpleasant if it becomes possible in the future. So better be safe. King to a1, and now a5. As the king is now safely tucked away on a1, Grishuk decides to start his own attack on the queen side. a4 will not win you the bishop, since a4 is guarded 3 times, but just opening, semi-opening the a file would be a very nice start of an attack for black. So a3, making some room for the bishop on a2, bishop to c7, and now comes f4. We have bishop to g4, a nice developing move, also pinning the knight on e2, and now e5. Grishuk tries to close the center. We have f5, and now comes a rook to d3. Unpinning, now the knight can move, and this rook will perhaps be free to roam around. Rook h to d8, Grishuk decides to develop a rook on the d file, and now comes knight to g3. Not the greatest square for the knight, perhaps, but it's better than being on e2. We have a rook to c8 now, aligning the rook with the queen on the c file, and also pretty much the only square where you can develop the rook. Bishop to a2. Again, a very nice move by Duda, as simply trying to play something developing like rook e1 or c1 would run into this c5 move, which would be very unpleasant since the bishop is kind of awkwardly placed here. Now c4 would be a pretty big threat. So again, simply improving the position. Bishop to a2 first, and now comes the bishop to b8. Black does the same, opening up the rook. Knight to f1 now. The knight wasn't really doing anything on g3, so now Duda tries to remaneuver it. We have knight to d5, bishop captures on d5, we have c captures on d5, and now queen to b3. And now you see, it was perhaps somewhat a weird idea why give up such a strong bishop for this knight on d5. Well, okay, the knight on d5 is also strong, and But the idea is that the pawn on a5 is very weak, and this is what Duda will use to, use as the means of pushing this game for more than a draw. So bishop captures pawn. Sorry about that. Pawn captures, and now comes queen to b3. We have rook to d7, and now knight to e3. E3, a pretty nice square for the knight. Again, it doesn't really have all that many squares, but perhaps it will capture this bishop at some point. And the bishop really now isn't doing all that much on g4. Rook c to d8, and now comes queen to b5, attacking the a5 pawn. We have queen to e6, and now comes queen captures on a5. Bishop to c7, attacking the queen, and now queen back to b5. And now bishop to b6, blocking the queen's attack against the b6 pawn. Rook to d2, a very nice move, creating some escape squares for the queen, and also preparing to double rooks on the c file. Bishop to a7, and now comes king to b1. King to h6, we have rook to c1 as planned. King to g7, Grishuk is simply waiting to see what Duda's plan is. Queen to b3, now with a lot of pressure against the d5 pawn. King to h6, and now knight to b5, also a reason why the queen was moved from b5. Now knight to b5 is played, the bishop is now kicked to b8, the bishop to b8 here, and now comes rook to c2. Now Duda successfully doubles rook on the c file. Queen to e7, and now comes knight captures on g4. Okay, f captures on g4, and now comes g3. So what do you do here? Well, it's a pretty blocked position, but you can pretty much feel white's position is much better here, simply because of the extra pawn, and because the knight is a bit better than this bishop on b8 that's really not doing all that much. Queen to e6 is played, and now comes rook to c8. Now Duda finds a way to infiltrate Grishuk's position. Queen to f5 check, we have king to a2, and now comes queen to e4. And here rook captures on d8. Rook captures on d8, and now comes a4. Also, a possible idea was queen to b4. Queen to b4 followed by queen to e7 and g5. Or if black prevents the queen from coming to e7, then even queen to c7. Queen to c5 would be possible, and then black's queen will not really be able to move, as she will constantly have to keep an eye on the d5 pawn. But okay, a4 was played in the game. We have king to g7. Again, Grishuk simply waits to see what will happen. Rook to c5, and now comes queen back to g2. Also, from g2, the queen is protecting the d5 pawn. But also, now if the white queen moves, then queen captures on g3 is also an idea. Rook back to c2, attacking black's queen. We have queen back to e4, and now rook back to c3. Queen back to g2, and now comes queen to b4. Duda now goes perhaps for this plan of queen to e7. We have rook to e8. Grishuk prevents this, and now comes queen to c5. We have queen back to e4, and now comes queen to b6, now with ideas of infiltrating via queen to f6. Queen to e2. Okay, we have queen captures on b7. Now the pawn, as it was undefended, Duda captures it, and now this becomes a passed a pawn, and now black's position is very difficult to play. But still, it's a blitz game. A lot can happen. Queen to d1, with the idea of capturing the a4 pawn. So we have b3, simply guarding it. Queen to h1 here. The queen is now guarding the d5 pawn. Queen to d7. Attacking the rook. Now comes rook to f8, and here e6. You can't capture because the f7 pawn is of course pinned. So queen to e1. We have e7, and now comes rook to g8. So okay, now the queen and the rook are both guarding the 8 square. You still can promote, so how do you push for the win here? a5, simply push another passed pawn. Queen to e2 check. We have king to a3, and now comes queen to e1. So what do you do here? King to b4, simply protect the rook on c3 with the king, so now the knight can move. We have bishop captures on f4. Grishuk doesn't really have any more options. You do have to act, as you're pretty much without a move. So g captures, and now comes g3. Grishuk sacrifices a piece, but at least he finds a way to activate his own passed pawn now. And here, a move like queen captures on d5, guarding the g2 square, would have been enough for Duda to win the game. For example, queen captures on e7, with check, king to a4, even queen captures on h4, but still white is up a piece and winning here. But it's a blitz game, both players are very low on time. Here Duda played knight to c7, and here Grishuk missed his opportunity to equalize this game, and perhaps, since it is a blitz game, to perhaps get even more than just equalize, but he didn't find it. But you know, you have all the time in the world. Feel free to pause the video and find the idea Grishuk missed for black in this position. I'll give it a couple of seconds as usual. For those of you who were able to find it, congratulations, you are an excellent saver of bad positions. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, rook to b8 check. Seems like a pretty straightforward thing, and if you had more time, most likely you would play it immediately. For example, if you move the king, then queen captures on c3 comes, and after you move the king, then black will always be able to keep checking the white king. On the other hand, if you block with the knight, for example, after rook to b8 check, you simply go knight back to b5, then g2 comes, and you don't really have a good way of promoting your passed e-pawn. For example, queen d6, attacking the rook, black will just ignore white. Feel free to capture my rook, I have now 2 queens on the board. Queen captures, and after queen captures on c7, on e7 with check, it's 2 queens against a rook, knight, and a queen. Not like a totally great advantage for black, but it is a better position for black. A blitz game and 2 queens for black. Here knight to c7 was played, as we've said, and wasn't really the greatest of moves. But Grishuk played g2 immediately. But now it's a bit different, because here white has simply d8, bringing another queen into the game. We have queen to g1, a move that simply doesn't work for black. Here what Duda was expecting was rook captures on e8, and after knight captures with check, let's say king g8, and now knight back to d6. And now after black brings another queen into the game, queen captures on f7 with check, king to h8, and now knight to b5, guarding the d4 pawn. And okay, you still can't deliver checkmate immediately because the rook is pinned, but white is much better here. The king is very nicely protected here. Even though black has 2 queens, white will very easily win this game. But instead, you know, it is a blitz game. Grishuk simply brought another queen into the game. And here we have queen captures on f7. And when Grishuk saw this move, he was really like, he didn't see this move, so I mean, he was lost either way. But when you're playing a blitz game and you're very low on time, of course you hope for the best always in any position. So here in this position, Alexander Grishuk resigned, because whatever he does, it's simply mate in 1. King to h8 or h6 will be met with queen to h7 checkmate. So yeah, in this position, Alexander Grishuk resigned, and an excellent victory for Jan Duda, the Polish Grandmaster, who won this entire match. I believe it's 14-13, so he won it via only a 1 point difference. And it's very interesting because Grishuk was leading the match, and at one point Duda even blundered a queen in the opening, and then he was able to come back in the match and even start winning, and in the end win the match. So a very impressive win by Polish Grandmaster Jan Duda, who advances to the semifinals. He awaits for his opponent in the Speed Chess Championship. But like I said, there will be a link in the description below. Feel free to check it out, and I do hope you enjoyed that as well. So that was the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Jano Kolbe, Krupal Madipati, Antonio Peric, and his 3 noob friends from Solin, Gil Troica and Aiden Keys for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. For the next quest, the quest for today, up until the next quest, is you have to checkmate your opponent with a pawn. So that is the quest. Best of luck to everyone, and congratulations to everyone who was able to finish the game with 6 knights on the board. So yeah, that's it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, maybe even starting the Spassky Fischer series. Thank you all, and I'll see you soon.